Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're in volume 7 today, which is Breathing Mindfulness Meditation. We're going to be finishing this book up today. We're going to be exploring chapters 21 through 34. We've been in this book for a few weeks, but now we're moving into the last set of chapters here. The way that we do this program is I invite students in Zoom to be able to read a chapter from the book. Then I'll share some teachings on that, and then I'm going to open up to any and all questions that you might have. We usually study 10 chapters, but today, since we're finishing out a book, we're going to be looking at 14 different chapters. So there's some of them that I'm going to shorten up, and we're not going to necessarily need to read the whole chapter, but I'll let you guys know when we get to that point. So if you have questions or you'd like to volunteer to read, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like that way. So is there anybody in Zoom who would like to read? Looks like Pat. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Breathing mindfulness meditation, well established. Annoying thoughts and impulses don't exist. Remain focused, monks, on foulness in the body. Have mindfulness of in and out breathing well established in front of you. Remain focused on the inconsistency of all untruths. For one who remains focused on the foulness of the body, the obsession with passion for the property of beauty is abandoned. For one who has mindfulness of in and out breathing well established in front of oneself, annoying thoughts and impulses don't exist. For one who remains focused on the inconsistency of all untruths, ignorance, unknowing of pure reality is abandoned. Clear wisdom arises. Focusing on foulness in the body, mindful of in and out breathing, seeing the stilling of all untruths, dedicated always, he is a monk who's seen clearly. From that, he is there liberated, a master of direct knowledge, experience, at peace. He is a wise one, gone beyond bondage. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. So this is the Buddha talking about how by practicing breathing mindfulness meditation, you don't experience annoying thoughts or impulses. This is the thoughts in the mind that are unwholesome. This can annoy the mind because it has craving maybe to have only wholesome thoughts. And you need to get to the point where your mind's not doing that and you don't have these impulses or these urges. So what the breathing mindfulness meditation is doing for you is giving you the ability to control the mind, where the mind is well disciplined, so that when you see unwholesome thoughts, you can cut them off and let them go. And when you see these urges or impulses to do things, you can restrain the mind and pull it back. Over time, as you ultimately get the mind to the point where it's fully trained, those things won't be happening, that there won't be any unwholesome thoughts. There won't be any urges or impulses to, bolt out and do a particular thing, because oftentimes when you're making those types of choices based in those urges and impulses, it's producing unwholesome results for you. So if you have any kind of unwholesome thoughts that are coming up and then you have a certain urge or an impulse and you actually do that thing, it's going to produce unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. So training the mind and breathing mindfulness meditation is going to help you to eliminate that. The Buddha here is also talking about foulness of the body. This is the meditation to eliminate sexual cravings, where you train your mind to not see the body as attractive, even though by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll know oh, that person's very beautiful or that person's very handsome. You won't have that overwhelming urge or craving to indulge in any kind of sexual activity or anything like that, because the mind will have develop this unattractiveness of the body, where you'll understand that there's pus and mucus and feces and urine and all these other things, and your mind is just kind of turned away from it. Because in the unenlightened state, we don't see true reality. What we see is the outer shell. We see the hair and the clothing and the makeup and jewelry and the muscles and the skin and all that kind of stuff. But this meditation to eliminate sexual cravings helps your mind to see true reality of what's really truly going on. Because if somebody had their skin all ripped off, you probably wouldn't be interested in having sex with that body. And that's what you can develop in the mind. And when or if you're ever ready to do that, that's a choice for each of you guys to make. You can get to that second stage of enlightenment and hang out there for a while and still be having a sexual relationship if that's what you're choosing to do. But ultimately you'll see more and more peace coming into the mind, and you'll start appreciating that much more than the temporary pleasure that you get through sex. So the Buddha is kind of walking through this here and helping you to see that, as well as being consistent to root out any untruths. Because any time that you make decisions based on an untruth, it's going to produce unwholesome results. So you would like to always get to the point where you understand true reality before making any decision. And oftentimes what that needs is for you to be able to ask questions of an individual who you're interacting with, to be able to know what is it that this individual is interested in knowing, or what is this person needing from you. You might ask a whole series of questions before you make a decision of what you may or may not end up doing in any given situation. So you'd like to remain focused on ensuring that before you make any decisions, that there's no untruths in the information that you've collected in order to be able to make that decision. Another thing that focusing on understanding the unattractiveness of the body and training the mind to do that, if you have personal existence view where you have this obsession or passion to be considered to be beautiful or handsome by other people, where you want to be perceived that way, this meditation can help you to do that too. That's not something that I have talked about too much, but that meditation is able to do that for you too. When you're developing that unattractiveness of the body, where you're reducing or eliminating your sexual cravings, it also helps you to be able to not be perceived by others as beautiful, because you already know that, yes, I need to take care of this body, but I'm not here to try to project any kind of beauty through this body. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, oh, it looks like Kristen has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
I just had a question about if suppose one is not having like sexual intercourse, but what happens? I mean, do you still have the same issues or attachments with like holding hands or hugging or cuddling and things like that? I guess, is there a real difference, or is it just like no physical contact at all?
What you're doing is you're removing the central desire in the mind, where the mind is looking for pleasure externally. So sexual contact is definitely where the mind's looking for, central desire and pleasure of the mind. And you can't actually have sex without that in the mind, unless, of course, somebody was being raped or something like that. But if someone is choosing at their own volition to have sex, then they're looking for certain pleasures. And that's the reason why the mind is choosing to do that. Holding hands and hugging, it's possible to do these things without central desire. You can have central desire there, and that's what you got to watch over with the mind. Like, for example, if you came home and you went to hug your partner and they were too busy and they didn't hug you, and you got disappointed about that, or frustrated or agitated, that's the mind seeking central pleasure. But you can eliminate that where it's just a hug. And now if they're able to hug you, great. And if not, your mind's not affected by that. Same thing with holding hands, that you're fine to hold hands, but you're not doing it in order to seek pleasure in that. Where the mind is not experiencing conditional pleasant feelings, that the mind's beyond that. So these types of things can actually be done without any kind of central desire. But sex itself, there's a certain central desire that the mind has there, and that's why it's doing that. So it's not just a matter of the action of whether you hold hands or hug or not. It's a matter of looking at the mind and seeing, is it longing, yearning for this thing? Where with sex, that's what the mind's doing. It's impossible to have sex based in your own volition without that longing, yearning. But with something like holding hands or hugging, it's possible to be able to do that. You just got to watch over the mind and make sure that that's the case.
Okay, thank you, Coach.
You're welcome. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So it looks like maybe Marcy is going to volunteer for this next chapter. Or you have a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
I actually have a question, but I am interested in reading as well. Would you like me to ask the question first, Teacher David?
Sure, if it's related to what we were just talking about, go for it.
Yeah, it is. It's actually related to what Kristen brought up. So, what if someone is in a relationship with someone? They're both studying on the path, but one is disinterested, or is at the point where they're not interested in having intercourse, but the other one is. Is there a balance there where the one that is not interested could just be a physical, I don't want to say like reservoir or whatever for that person that still wants to, and not have any kind of sensual desire in the mind, like just obviously just lay there and just be in that, and not have that?
Well, I would suggest that anybody should only do something if they're really interested in doing it, instead of, just kind of like doing kind of what you're describing. If you're not interested in having sex, then don't have sex. It's not wise to do that. But what would be helpful is if, if a one person is working on eliminating their sexual desire and their central desire for sex, that the other person understands that. Because if one person just goes off and starts eliminating and kind of leaves the other person kind of hanging, now, this one person's sexual cravings are diminishing while the other ones are still intact, and it becomes very contentious in the relationship. So it's good to have kind of a check-in to be able to understand that, this is what we're headed towards, and this is what we're going to do, and this is the choice we're making individually, but we're having a conversation about it to make sure that both people understand that that's what we're doing, so that now both people can work in that direction. And that usually works out best.
Excellent. Thank you, Teacher David.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, Marcy, if you're going to read this, we don't need to read this whole long part where the Buddha is teaching about his meditation, because we've done that in previous classes. So maybe you can just read the top section and then the bottom part.
Excellent. Monks, if wanderers of other communities ask you, in what dwelling, friends, did the perfectly enlightened one generally dwell during the rain's retreat? Being asked thus, you should answer those wanderers thus. During the rain's residence, friends, the perfectly enlightened one generally resides in a concentration by mindfulness of breathing. Here, monks, if anyone, monks, speaks rightly could say of anything, it is a noble dwelling, an excellent dwelling. The Tathagata dwelling, it is of concentration by mindfulness of breathing, that one could rightly say this. Monks, those monks who are trainees, who have not attained their mind's ideal, who dwell aspiring for the unsuppressed security from bondage. For them, concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, leads to the destruction of taints. Those monks who are arahants, whose taints are destroyed, who have lived the holy life, done what had been done, laid down the burden, reached their own goal, completely destroyed the fetters of existence, those completely liberated through final knowledge, for the concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, leads to a peaceful dwelling in this very life and to mindfulness and clear comprehension. If anyone, monks, speaks rightly could say anything, it is a noble dwelling, an excellent dwelling. The Tathagata dwelling is of concentration by mindfulness of breathing, that one could rightly say this.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. So the Buddha had a period of time, it's called the Rains Retreat, which is actually happening right now, where for 3 months out of the year, he encouraged his students to be able to stay put and to not travel and to stay wherever they were and to actually study and spend this time to do this inner work and inner growth and inner development, about a 3-month period every year. The reason why is because during his lifetime, 2,500 years ago, there weren't well-defined roads and sidewalks and land borders and stuff like that. So if you can imagine, during the lifetime of a Buddha, there's countless people that are studying with this person. And now they're all traveling to where he is, and they're having to walk through people's land in order to be able to get to where he's at. And because it's the rainy season, the earth is very soft and they would sometimes need to walk through people's crops in order to be able to get from one place to the other. And all these countless people coming to where the Buddha was, they would be trampling these crops if he, invited them to come to where he was at. So he encouraged them to stay put for this 3-month period and really work on this inner growth and this inner development, so that's a period of time where they're not traveling and damaging crops. So the Buddha here is sharing with his students that, hey, if you're talking with those people in those other communities, not his community, but other communities, people who are studying with other teachers, because you might think that the Buddha was the only one teaching during his lifetime, but there were countless other people too that were teaching, but he knew it was his teachings that would lead to enlightenment, not these other teachers. So these other students would sometimes get together with the students of the Buddha, and they would have dialogue and conversations and compare notes about what one teacher was teaching the other, because not everybody knew that he was a Buddha. So he's saying here that, hey, suppose those other people were to ask you, where did he reside during this rains retreat? And he said the answer is in breathing mindfulness meditation. That's where I resided, that I was doing a bunch of breathing mindfulness meditation during this period of time. And he gets down here to this part where he's talking about how someone whose mind is not yet enlightened, right? Those monks who are trainees, who have not attained the mind's ideal, who dwell aspiring for the unsurpassed security from bondage. He's saying, okay, these people who are trainees, who haven't yet attained enlightenment, but they aspire to attain enlightenment, what are they doing? Well, they're practicing breathing mindfulness meditation because they understand that it leads to the destruction of the taints, the fetters. So those people who are not yet enlightened, they're training in breathing mindfulness meditation. Then he says those monks who are arahants, which are enlightened beings, those who have destroyed the taints, right? The taints are destroyed, that they're living this holy life. They've done what had to be done. Their fetters are completely destroyed. Their mind is all the way to final knowledge, meaning they're enlightened. Well, what are they doing? Oh, they're actually doing breathing mindfulness meditation too, right? And then he himself, as the Buddha, he's doing breathing mindfulness meditation. So he's making it very clear that if you are either interested in getting to enlightenment, or even if you've already attained enlightenment, you're going to be doing breathing mindfulness meditation. It's a place where the mind can reside and the mind can actually be trained during this period of time. Of course, by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is beyond training, but you'll still continue to meditate, because a enlightened being who gets to enlightenment, say today, versus someone who got to enlightenment 10 years ago, neither one of them are experiencing discontentedness. They're both effectively enlightened. But the person who got to enlightenment 10 years ago, their mind is going to be much more developed with concentration and focus, even more so than the person who just got to enlightenment. They're going to have wisdom about many other things related to the world than this person who just got to enlightenment. So there's no hierarchy here, but just understand that the path doesn't stop when you get to enlightenment. It's not like a marathon that you run a marathon and you pass the finish line. It's like, finally, I can stop practicing these teachings. I don't need to do meditation anymore. Oh, this is great. No, it's actually just the opposite. It's like you're effortlessly practicing the teachings by the time you get to enlightenment. You're not going to stop practicing them just because your mind has gotten to enlightenment, because all these wise decisions that you made for countless years or several years in order to be able to get to enlightenment, you're not going to just stop making those same wise decisions, because those wise decisions led to the best thing that you've experienced your entire life, which is this enlightened mental state, and you'll continue to do those things. And the Buddha is making it very clear that this meditation is to get you to enlightenment. And even when you're enlightened, you're still going to continue to be meditating here. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I don't see any questions. So we'll go to the next chapter. This is chapter 23. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Vibhav, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, teacher. Through breathing mindfulness meditation, no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind. at Savatthi. Now, on that occasion, the Venerable Mahakapina was sitting not far from the perfectly enlightened one, with his legs folded crosswise, holding his body straight, having set up mindfulness in front of him. The perfectly enlightened one saw him sitting nearby, with his legs folded crosswise, his body straight, having set up mindfulness in front of him. Having seen him, he addressed the monks thus: Monks, do you see any shaking or trembling in this monk's body? Venerable Sir, whenever we see the Venerable One, whether he's sitting in the midst of the community or sitting alone in private, we never see any shaking or trembling in that Venerable One's body. Monks, that monks gains at will, without trouble or difficulty, that concentration through the development and cultivation of which no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind. And what concentration is it through the development and cultivation of which no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind? It is, monks, when concentration by mindfulness of breathing has been developed and cultivated, that no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind. And how, monks, is concentration by mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated so that no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind? Here, monks, a monk, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down. Having folded his leg crosswise, straightened his body, and set up mindfulness in front of him, he mindfully breathes in, mindfully breathes out. He trains this, experiencing the whole body, repeated at chapter 1. He trains this, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe in. He trains this, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe out. It is, monks, when concentration by mindfulness of breathing has been developed and cultivated this way, that no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Vibhav. So you guys know that when you've been like really super angry or frustrated before, how your mind is actually shaking, right? And you see this in the body that you can actually, your arms and hands can be shaking. I'm sure you've experienced that before, right? That's what's going on, is that because the mind is shaken, because there's some craving that is getting triggered and the mind is shaking, the body starts shaking. But if you're training with breathing mindfulness meditation, this isn't going to occur, because by the time you train your mind more and more, you have discipline and control over your mind. Your mind's not going to shake. You have steadiness and stability in the mind. And because the mind is steady and stable, the body is stable and steady. So that's what the Buddha is sharing with you, that, hey, all this shaking up that the mind does, well, it's breathing mindfulness meditation that's going to fix all that. So staying dedicated and determined to developing your meditation practice is what's going to lead to that, because it's no fun, right? Sometimes you can almost hyperventilate. You're so angry and frustrated, or people might call that a panic attack or something like that. That's because the mind's shaking. There's some craving that's been triggered, and you can eliminate that through training with breathing mindfulness meditation. And of course, there's other things that you need besides breathing mindfulness meditation, but this is an important aspect of your practice to get to this point where your mind or your body is shaking. So any questions on this chapter here? Okay, I don't see any questions. Oh, looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, teacher. In the comments, I think what you said is more towards like it's about restlessness. So is this both the restlessness as well as any trembling or shaking that occurs through, say, anger or other things as well?
It's both. That with restlessness in the mind can shake, and it's not as significant by the time you're dealing with restlessness. It's just kind of overactivity. But these are two things that can happen, is that the mind can shake, and when you're angry, when you're frustrated, but having gotten rid of anger and frustration, if that's what you've done, by the time someone's gotten to the third stage of enlightenment, if there's still some restlessness, the breathing mindfulness meditation is helping that as well.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Is there someone who would like to read chapter 24? Okay, Kristen, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, teacher. The final in-breaths and out-breaths are known. Rahula, Develop meditation on mindfulness of breathing, breathing mindfulness meditation. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it is of great fruit and great benefit. And how is mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and great benefit? Here, Rahula, a monk, gone to the forest or to the foot of a tree or to an empty hut, sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, set his body erect, and established mindfulness in front of him. Ever mindful, he breathes in. Mindful, he breathes out. Breathing in long, he knows, I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he knows, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he knows, I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he knows, I breathe out short. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go. I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go. I will breathe out. Rahula, that is how mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and great benefit. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated in this way, even the final in-breaths and out-breaths are known as they cease to unknown. I'm sorry, to cease, not unknown.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. So here, you can actually know when you're taking your final in-breath and out-breath, meaning the body is at death. That's not the ultimate goal of practicing breathing mindfulness meditation, but the Buddha is helping you to be able to understand that this breathing mindfulness meditation develops the mind so well. Not only does it get you to enlightenment, which he talks about in all these other discourses that we've been reading, but you're actually going to know your final in-breath and out-breath. Have you ever been around somebody who's actually died and actually taken their final in-breath and out-breath? You can see that someone who's trained their mind, they actually know when the final in-breath and out-breath is. Again, that's not the ultimate goal, but that's just how well the mind would be developed by this point if you're continuing to train your mind all the way through to enlightenment. And then now ultimately you get to death, you're going to know the final in-breaths and out-breaths. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, looks like Vibhav. Go ahead, Vibhav.
Thank you, teacher. Does it mean that you will know when you're going to die, or does it just mean that when you're about to die, you know, like, what you, like the next, say, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 20 minutes, or maybe next day you'll be dying?
Yeah, it's the final in-breath and out-breath, the final breath that you're going to take.
So you know when you're going to take the final breath?
It's at the moment. It's at the moment that the final breath is being taken that you'll know that this is your final breath.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, looks like Kristen. Go ahead, ma'am.
I guess the ultimate goal at that point you wouldn't have fear, right? At that final moment of your last breath. Like if you have let go of all attachments, then we would just cease to exist. There would be no fear, no clinging. It would just kind of end.
Exactly. By the time you've gotten to enlightenment, let's just say you've done that a year, 5 years, 20 years, 3 minutes before death, whenever you got to enlightenment, when you get to that final in-breath and out-breath, it's just like, okay, final in-breath, out-breath, done.
Gosh, that would be nice.
Yeah, that's the benefit of having let go of all the cravings. Because when the mind's holding on to all this stuff, the mind doesn't want to go, and it's very painful. But when you've already let all this go, and you just know, like, it's just time to move on, then it's so easy and so peaceful for the mind.
Okay, thank you, teacher.
Mm-hmm. Marcy, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. For the Buddha, he knew when his death day was coming, correct? Or did he know the specific day, or was he knew around the time? And that's why he went out to his monks or his students and said, listen, this is what's coming. Be prepared, prepare the mind. I think he had one monk that was very attached to him, that he initiated that conversation with.
Yeah, so he gave them a 3 months heads up. He didn't say the exact date. He just gave 3 months heads up, and it was a community of ordained practitioners, but there was one particular student who was very close to the Buddha that spoke up and was begging and pleading with him not to die. But there were other students present as well. Okay, so as I go to the next chapter, Vibhav, I would like you to just be able to see this here. You must not have seen this or didn't understand here when the Buddha is saying the final in-breath and out-breath as they cease, right? They're known as they cease. So in that moment, that's what he's talking about there. Okay, would somebody like to read this chapter 25? Okay, looks like Pat and then Marcy for that.
One who perceives non-self eradicates the conceit, I am. When a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will be virtuous, practicing moral conduct. One who resides restrained by the training guidelines possessed of wholesome conduct and resolving difficult situations, seeing danger in the slightest faults, having undertaken the training guidelines, will train in them. When a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will get to hear at will, without trouble or difficulty, talk concerned with the holy life that is conducive to opening up the heart. That is, talk on elimination of desires, on contentment, on solitude, on not getting bound up with others, on arousing energy, on virtuous behavior, on concentration, on wisdom, on liberation, on the wisdom and vision of liberation. When a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will be wise, possessing the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away, which is noble and penetrative, and leads to the complete destruction of discontentedness. Having based himself on these 5 things, the monk should develop further another 4 things. 1, the perception of unattractiveness of the body should be developed to abandon lust. 2, loving kindness should be developed to abandon ill will. 3, mindfulness of breathing should be developed to cut off thoughts. 4, the perception of impermanence should be developed to eradicate the conceit, I am. When one perceives impermanence, perception of non-self is stabilized. One who perceives non-self eradicates the conceit, I am, which is nibbana in this very life. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So you guys have seen a portion of this discourse if you've taken the, meditation class that I teach, where I actually teach the 4 types of meditation, and I show you guys this bottom section of the discourse here, helping you guys to understand the method of practice for breathing mindfulness meditation is to cut off thoughts, because you're building that internal mechanism in the mind to be able to cut off and cut off and cut off, so that now as you're exercising the mind that way in meditation 2 or 3 times a day in your day-to-day life, wherever you see unwholesomeness coming up in the mind, you can actually cut that off and let it go, because you've built that internal mechanism in the mind. This is where you can understand your goal is not to eliminate your thoughts, but to notice them sooner and sooner and cut them off easier and easier. So these are the only 4 meditations that the Buddha ever taught. You'll go to retreats, you'll read books that have Buddhism labeled on it, you'll hear podcasts and watch videos of all kinds of different meditations out there that people are actually teaching. But these are the only 4 that the Buddha ever taught. And remember, he cautioned us to not change his teachings, because once you change the teachings of a Buddha, they're no longer effective to be able to get to enlightenment. So you'd like to get your practice back to what the Buddha taught, because that's what's going to lead to enlightenment. So these are the only 4 meditations that you would ever need to know. And these 2, the loving kindness meditation and breathing mindfulness meditation, are the 2 that are really needed by each individual practitioner, because the breathing mindfulness meditation is addressing craving, desire, attachment, the cause of discontentedness. The loving kindness meditation is addressing the anger, the hatred, and the ill will. So that's addressing craving and anger. And then you're addressing your ignorance or the unknowing of true reality by not believing anything and cultivating wisdom. These other two meditations are here in order to help you eliminate sexual cravings or reduce them if you're interested in doing that. And then there's a meditation to help you realize non-self. So while everybody's going to need to realize non-self in order to get to even the first stage of enlightenment, and if someone's interested in getting to the third or fourth stage of enlightenment, they're going to need to eliminate sexual cravings. Not everybody needs these meditations in order to be able to accomplish that, because there's other methods that you can practice. There's multiple ways to kind of come at eliminating this personal existence view. And there's multiple things that can be used in order to help you eliminate sexual cravings. So everyone's going to need breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation. You would be wise to learn these other meditations and apply them, because it's only going to help you to accomplish these goals of getting to enlightenment. But when or if and at what point in your practice you choose to implement them, that's a choice for you to make. So you've already seen this probably in other classes that I taught. You haven't seen this section here, which is, I usually say, the Buddha was teaching other stuff, before he got to this point. And this is that other stuff where he's talking about having wholesome friends, that there's these 5 things that a practitioner would have developed as part of having these 5 friends. So this doesn't really relate to meditation, but it's nonetheless things that you need to be able to cultivate as part of your journey on the path to enlightenment. You're going to need to see the slightest danger, seeing danger in the slightest fault. You're going to need to see that, because more and more as you start to eliminate your old unwholesome karma, and you're getting longer and longer time frames where you're not experiencing any unwholesome karma coming back to you, you're going to start being able to see very clearly when you make that one small, slight, unwise decision, you're going to see what it produces. You're going to see the karma. Where when you're making a whole bunch of unwise decisions, or you've recently been making a whole bunch of unwise decisions, and you first get onto the path, you kind of have all this unwholesome karma coming back to you that is kind of hard to see individual decisions that you're making that's leading to any particular result. But as you start getting things cleaned up more and more in your day-to-day life with your moral conduct, you start noticing the slightest little fault in your moral conduct affects the results that you're experiencing. And you can see that more and more clearly. And you become even more determined and more dedicated to improving what you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis through improving your own moral conduct. Then the Buddha is talking down here about hearing talk, where you can actually learn the teachings. That's what you guys are doing now, is like you're learning the teachings, and that when you have wholesome friends and companions, that you are able to hear about wholesome things, that you're not, kind of having this multitude of unwise speech coming at you, but instead you're talking about the teachings and wholesome things and hearing the words of the Buddha to be able to learn and grow and develop on the path. Then you arouse this energy for abandoning unwholesome qualities and acquiring wholesome qualities, because you have these wholesome friends. That when you have unwholesome friends and they're in enough wholesome things, you tend to do those types of things. But when you cultivate wholesome relationships, it tends to bring out the best in you. And that's going to help you in your journey to enlightenment. And then he's talking here about how you learn this wisdom of the arising and passing away and the complete destruction of discontentedness. This is the universal truth of impermanence, that you learn about these things as you have wholesome friends, because they're into wholesome things and they're wise and they're interested in journeying on this path. So these are things that you haven't necessarily learned before unless you've read this actual chapter. But these are things that you can develop as part of your journey on the path. And this is what you would need to develop as part of your journey on the path. So let me know what questions you guys have here. It looks like Marcy. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Teacher David. In the second paragraph, when the Buddha is speaking here, talk concerned with the holy life that is conducive to opening up the heart. That is, talk on elimination of desire, on contentment, on solitude, and not getting bound up, or arousing energy, on virtuous behavior, on concentration on wisdom, on liberation, on the wisdom and the visions of liberation. This to me, so when we are having conversation with you, Teacher David, or with our wholesome companions, that opening up of the heart that's that where you would speak of only like the truths of what you are. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly. Whereas when you're having conversation with others who you may be wholesome or not, you wouldn't completely divulge all aspects of your thoughts, of your experiences. Is that what he's explaining here?
What he's talking about is that if you have wholesome friends and companions, then you hear talk, meaning, during his lifetime, he would have spoke and delivered the teachings, and then he would encourage his students to go off and talk about those teachings and discuss them. And that would help them to bring the teachings up to the forefront of their mind. So now they're discussing the teachings, and it's helping them to open up the mind. The Buddha will sometimes use the word heart to refer to the mind. That's why here in Thailand they think about the mind as being inside the heart. So that's what he's referring to here, is that you will have conversations with your friends and companions related to what it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. That's what he's talking about here, about wisdom on liberation and wisdom and vision of liberation.
All right. Thank you, Teacher David.
Sure. Let's see. Don't see any other questions. Oh, it looks like Lyndon. Go ahead, sir.
Yes. On the last part of it, can you scroll up a bit? Yeah, like the first part is the last sentence that about like now self and the conceit I am, and then which will leading to nirvana. Because the question here is like, it looks like Buddha is talking about the two feathers. One is a personal existence view, and another one is conceit. And eliminating these two will lead to enlightenment. Is that what he's saying? Or actually, he's saying that eliminating the clinging to the five aggregates, which leads to enlightenment.
Yeah, so in order to get to enlightenment, as you know, you need to eliminate all the 10 fetters, right?
Right.
But what he's saying here is that, he's introducing these 4 meditations, and he's referring to this conceit, I am. This is where the mind with personal existence view will have this thought like, I am this, or I am that. I am an electrician. I am a carpenter. I am hungry, I am kind, any of this I am,
Right.
That's the mind grabbing onto this idea of a personal existence view. So the mind can then have conceit around that. So by getting rid of that, that's what's going to help you to get to enlightenment. But it's not the only thing, of course. You need to still eliminate all the other fetters. So this is why you can understand that the personal existence view, that fetter, and then the fetter of conceit, we refer to this as the ego, and that's what needs to be eliminated here. The word ego didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha, so he rightly separated it, because the symptoms of these two fetters and the way to eliminate them are actually unique and different, but it also helps us to understand it as one thing too, because you can see even the Buddha to a certain degree was thinking of it in that way, but he just didn't have the word ego to talk about it that way.
Got it. Okay. So it's like, it's not saying that only eliminating these two or ego will be leading to nirvana. It's more like this is something that we have to do. It's required, not necessarily leading to.
Yeah. So you should never look at the teachings of the Buddha in isolation, right? Because you need to look at the totality of his teachings. So he can share a teaching like this where he says, yeah, the one who perceives this, it eradicates the conceit, I am, which is nibbana or enlightenment in this very life. That's just one aspect of the teachings. If you look at that in isolation, you may think, oh, that's all I need to do is I just need to do this and I'll get to enlightenment. But, if that was the case, we wouldn't have 45 books that are this thick, right? If there was only this one paragraph that you needed to understand to get to enlightenment. So this is just one facet of a wider picture that he's describing through all of his teachings.
Got it. Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I think Marcy was interested in reading. We have this next chapter, 26. Let's see, where's Marcy? There you are. Go ahead, Marcy.
Thank you, Teacher David. Things that lead to the liberation of mind. Magahi, when liberation of the mind is not developed, 5 things lead to its development. What 5? Here, I'm just going to say M. A monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades. When liberation of mind is not developed, this is the first thing that leads to its development. Again, a monk is virtuous, practicing moral conduct. He resides restrained by the training guidelines, possessed of wholesome conduct and determination, seeing danger in the slightest faults, having undertaken the training guidelines, he trains in them. When liberation of mind has not developed, this is the second thing that leads to its development. Again, a monk who gets to hear at all, a monk gets to hear at will, without trouble or difficulty, talk concerned with the holy life that is conducive to opening up the heart, that is, talk on elimination of desires, on contentment, on solitude, on getting bound up, on arousing energy, virtuous behavior, on concentration, on wisdom, on liberation, on the wisdom and vision of liberation. When liberation of mind has not developed, this is the third thing that leads to its development. Again, a monk has aroused energy for abandoning unwholesome qualities and acquiring wholesome qualities. He is strong, firm in effort, not casting off the duty of cultivating wholesome qualities. When liberation of mind has not developed, this is the fourth thing that leads to its development. Again, a monk is wise. He is possessing the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away, which is noble and penetrative, and leads to the complete destruction of discontentedness. When liberation of mind has not developed, this is the fifth thing that leads to its development. When M, a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will be virtuous, practicing a moral conduct. One who resides restrained by the training guidelines will train in them. When a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will go to hear at will, without trouble or difficulty, talk concerned with the holy life that is conducive to opening up the heart, that is, talk on elimination of desires, on wisdom and visions of liberation. When a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will arouse energy for abandoning unwholesome qualities, not casting off the duty of cultivating wholesome qualities. When a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will be wise, possessing the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away, which is noble and penetrative, and leads to the complete destruction of discontentedness. Having based himself on these 5 things, the monk should develop further another 4 things. The perception of unattractiveness of the body should be developed to abandon lust. Loving kindness should be developed to abandon ill will. Mindfulness of breathing should be developed to cut off thoughts. The perception of impermanence should be developed to eradicate the conceit, I am. When one perceives impermanence, the perception of non-self is stabilized. One who perceives non-self eradicates concentration of I am, which is nibbana, in this very life.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So this is very similar to the previous discourse that we just read and just talked about. The way that I suggest you use a discourse like this is that you go through each of these things and you make sure that you're paying attention to them and developing them in your own life. So this first one, the Buddha is just talking about developing wholesome friends. Make sure that you're paying attention to that you're looking at the 5 precepts, because those are a great guide for you as a way that you're not judging other people and looking down on people, but you're making wise decisions about who to involve in your life. Because if you have someone who's killing, stealing, having sexual misconduct, they're lying, they're taking substances that cause heedlessness, this is going to cause problems for their life because they're choosing to do that. But if you choose to associate with that individual, that choice that you're making to do that, it's going to affect you and create unwholesome game in your life. So you like to pay attention to that and make sure that you're having people around you understanding that only an enlightened being is going to be perfect, but making sure that the people you include aren't doing unwholesome things that are impacting you. Because if so, it would be wise for you to just move on from that relationship. Then this next one is, again, seeing the slightest fault in the things that you're involved in. You would like to be sure that you start paying attention to those things, that you're having talk on the teachings that lead to enlightenment. That's important. You do that if you're attending classes, but also having conversation with your other members of the community. And then that you arouse this energy for abandoning unwholesome qualities and acquiring wholesome qualities, that you're firm in this effort, that you're not casting this off to others, because this is where the mind can be complacent. And if there's complacency in the mind, it's not going to help you to be able to get to enlightenment. So where you see complacency, you would like to root that out, and the sooner the better, because if you allow the complacency to stay in the mind, it's really hard to get rid of it. So you need to be able to see whenever the mind is being complacent and now root that out and really be attentive to cultivating wholesome qualities and eliminating unwholesome qualities. And then have this wisdom of the universal truth of impermanence and the wisdom that it takes to be able to train the mind to get to enlightenment. So that's what the Buddha is talking about here, is these 5 qualities. You would like to cultivate those. And then he's giving you these 4 other qualities to cultivate, that you would like to make sure you have these as part of your tool belt. So that's how you use a discourse like this, and just make sure that you're developing each of these individual things. And you've got to pick and choose as you're developing of what you can really get your arms around at any one given time. Because if you study all 10 chapters and you try to implement all of those things in 1 week, it's not going to be possible. So you've got to kind of pick and choose certain things and just know that the Buddha is helping you to see the things that you need to develop. And then over time, you're going to need to develop all these things where the Buddha is pointing the way. And now you kind of plot your steps and slowly but surely, gradually develop your mind in that direction. And these meditations are also part of what you need to be able to develop as well. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this discourse. Okay, I don't see any questions. So we'll go to the next one. This is chapter 27. Was there someone who would like to read this one? Yeah, this is the very long one. Or not very long, but fairly long. Okay, so let's see. We're probably going to just read a portion of this. So it looks like Vibhav, you would like to read, or maybe Kristen. Did you have a question, Kristen, or were you volunteering to read? No, that was reading. Okay, so go ahead, Vibhav.
Thank you. 10 perceptions for curing of an affliction. If, Ananda, you visit the monk Girimananda and speak to him about 10 perceptions, it is possible that on hearing about them, his sickness will immediately subside. What are the 10? Perception of impermanence, the perception of non-self, perception of unattractiveness of the body, the perception of danger, the perception of abandoning, the perception of freedom from strong feelings, perception of elimination, the perception of non-delight in the entire world, the perception of impermanence in all conditional mental objects, and mindfulness of breathing. And what, Ananda, is the perception of impermanence? Here, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, a monk reflects thus: form is impermanent, feeling is impermanent, perception is impermanent, volitional formations are impermanent, consciousness is impermanent. Thus, he resides reflecting on impermanence in these 5 aggregates subject to clinging. This is called the perception of impermanence. And what, Ananda, is a perception of non-self? Here, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, a monk reflects thus: the eye is non-self, forms are non-self, the ear is non-self, sounds are non-self, the nose is non-self, odors are non-self, the tongue is non-self, flavors are non-self, the body is non-self, physical objects are non-self, the mind is non-self, mental objects are non-self. Thus, he resides reflecting on the non-self in these 6 internal and external sense spaces. This is called the perception of non-self. And what, Ananda, is a perception of unattractiveness of the body? Here, a monk reviews this very body upward from the soles of the feet and downward from the tips of the hairs. enclosed in skin, as full of many kinds of impurities. There are in this body hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, pleura, spleen, lungs, intestines, mesentery, stomach, excrement, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, saliva, mucus, fluid of the joints, urine. Thus he resides reflecting on unattractiveness in the body. This is called the perception of unattractiveness of the body. And what Ananda is the perception of danger. Here, again having gone to the forest, to the foot of the tree, to an empty hut, a monk reflects thus. This body is the source of much pain and danger, for all sorts of afflictions arise in the body. That is, eye disease, disease of the inner ear, nose disease, tongue disease, body disease, head disease, disease of the external ear, mouth disease, tooth disease, cough, asthma, catarrh, pyrexia, fever, stomachache, fainting, dysentery, gripes, cholera, leprosy boils, eczema, tuberculosis, epilepsy, ringworm, itch, scab, chickenpox, scabies, hemorrhage, diabetes, hemorrhoids, cancer, fistula, illnesses originating from bile, phlegm, wind, or their combination, illnesses produced by change of climate, illnesses produced by careless behavior, illnesses produced by assault, or illnesses produced as a result of unwholesome karma, and cold, heat, hunger, thirst, defecation, and urination. Thus he resides reflecting on danger in this body. This is called the perception of danger. And what Ananda is the perception of abandoning. Here, a monk does not tolerate an arisen sensual thought. He abandons it, dispels it, terminates it, and obliterates it. He does not tolerate an arisen thought of ill will, an arisen thought of harming, evil and wholesome states. Whenever they arise, he abandons them, dispels them, terminates them, and obliterates them. This is called the perception of abandoning. And what Ananda is the perception of freedom from strong feelings. Here, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, a monk reflects thus. This is peaceful, this is superb. That is, the stilling of mind activities, the letting go of all greed, the destruction of craving, freedom from strong feelings, nibbana. This is called the perception of freedom from strong feelings. And what Ananda is a perception of elimination. Here, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, the monk reflects thus. This is peaceful, this is superb. That is, the stilling of mind activities, the letting go of all greed, the destruction of craving, elimination, nibbana. This is called the perception of elimination. And what Ananda is a perception of non-excitement in the whole world. Here, a monk refrains from any engagement in clinging, mental standpoints, adherences, and underlying tendencies in regard to the world, abandoning them without clinging to them. This is called the perception of non-excitement in the entire world. And what Ananda is a perception of impermanence in all conditioned mental objects. Here, a monk is repelled, unenthusiastic, and disinterested by all conditioned mental objects. This is called the perception of impermanence in all conditioned mental objects. And what Ananda is mindfulness of breathing. Here, a monk, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body, and established mindfulness in front of him. Just mindfully breathes in, mindfully breathes out. This is called mindfulness of breathing. If, Ananda, you visit the monk Garamananda and speak to him about these 10 perceptions, it is possible that on hearing about them, he will immediately recover from his sickness. Then, when the Venerable Ananda had learned these 10 perceptions from the perfectly enlightened one, he went to the Venerable Girimananda and spoke to him about them. Then the Venerable Girimananda heard about these 10 perceptions. His sickness immediately subsided. Venerable Girimananda recovered from that sickness, and that is how he was cured of his sickness. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Vibhav. So again, the way that you use a discourse like this is you go point by point, each of these individual perceptions, and be sure that the mind has developed that. And you need to know when is the time for you to do each of these individual things. Ultimately, what the Buddha gets to is breathing mindfulness meditation. And the reason why he's talking about that a sickness can be cured from these things is because oftentimes it's contemplation of things that are going on in the mind that you can eliminate any kind of clinging or craving that the mind has. And by freeing that, you free the mind of its stress, of its anxiety, and all these other discontent feelings. And this can help to, get rid of a certain illness or sickness in the body that oftentimes it's mind over matter. And I think even nowadays, they keep statistics that about 60 to 80% of all doctor visits are stress related. And by an individual going to the doctor, they're actually really struggling with stress. They might be seeing physical symptoms, but it's actually, and that's what's driving them to go see the doctor, but it's really coming back to stress in the mind. So these types of things that an individual could develop the perception of and actually train the mind through meditation is what will train the mind to let all that go. And now the mind doesn't have that stress, and now the physical symptoms can be alleviated. So these is something that you can go through and be sure that you cultivate this understanding. That's what it is that the Buddha is really describing here, as an understanding of each one of these things. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So there's a question here in YouTube. Let's just see. Is it actually a question? Vanity is something that should be rooted out. Okay, that's not a question. That's more of a statement. So there's nothing for me to answer there. All right. All right. I don't see any questions anywhere. So let's go to the next chapter. This is chapter, let's see, 28. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, it looks like Kristen and then Marcy. Go ahead, Kristen.
Thank you, teacher. 5 things to penetrate to the unshakable. Monks, possessing 5 things, a monk pursuing mindfulness of breathing, in no long time penetrates to the unshakable. What 5? 1. Here, a monk has a few undertakings, few tasks, is easy to support, and is easily contented with the necessities of life. 2. He eats little and is intent on moderation regarding food. 3. He is rarely drowsy and is intent on alertness. 4. He has learned much, remembers what he has learned, and cultivates what he has learned. Those teachings that are good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing, which proclaim the perfectly complete and pure spiritual life. Such teachings as these he has learned much of, retained in mind, recited verbally, mentally investigated, and penetrated well by view. 5. He reviews the extent to which his mind is liberated. Possessing these 5 things, a monk pursuing mindfulness of breathing, in no long time penetrates to the unshakable. Second discourse. Monks, possessing 5 things, a monk developing mindfulness of breathing, in no long time penetrates to the unshakable. What 5? Here, a monk has few undertakings, few tasks, is easy to support, and is easily contented with the necessities of life. He eats little and is intent on moderation regarding food. He's rarely drowsy and is intent on alertness. He gets to hear at will, without trouble or difficulty, talk concerned with the holy life that is conducive to opening up the heart, that is talk on elimination of desires, on contentment, on solitude, on not getting bound up with others, on arousing energy, on virtuous behavior, on concentration, on wisdom, on liberation, on the wisdom and vision of liberation. He reviews the extent to which his mind is liberated. Possessing these 5 things, a monk developing mindfulness of breathing in no long time penetrates to the unshakable.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. So the unshakable is the enlightened mind. I've shared with you guys before that the mind is unshakable. It's steady. It's stable. And that's the words of the Buddha here as well. You can see that he's describing that. Oftentimes people think that the Buddha never described what enlightenment is, but of course he described it, and he helped people to understand what it is so they can more readily make their way towards it. So these are 5 things in 2 different discourses that he's describing that you need to be able to practice in order to be able to get to this unshakable liberation. So this first one is, he says he has few undertakings, right? So if you wake up with a list of 30 things you're going to do in a day, that's not a few undertakings, but that tends to be what we do when we have craving, desire, attachment in our mind. Your to-do list is yay long, right? And now you race around trying to hurry up and get all those things done. So you have few undertakings, few tasks, you're easy to support, and you're easily contented with the necessities in life, where your mind's not longing, yearning, and chasing after these things. So pay attention to that. Maybe you have 2 or 3 or 4 things that you're working on a given day. And if you have extra time, maybe you add a few more things as you go, but you aren't just racing around town to hurry up and get all those things done. You would like to really just take your time. We have a saying here in Thailand. It's a Thai word. We say cha-cha. What cha-cha means is it means slowly, slowly. Whenever you're doing things in your day-to-day life, you would like to cha-cha, right? And for those of you guys that maybe like dancing, maybe the cha-cha isn't so slow, but that's what the Thai word is. So you would like to really slow down, because with craving, desire, attachment in the mind will be just the opposite of that. But you would like to do things slowly, slowly, cha-cha. Then when you're eating, what the mind will tend to do when it has craving is it'll gorge itself. So you would like to eat in moderation, that you're not gorging yourself, but you're also not, eating so little that you're not sustaining your life either. So you need to come to the middle, and also be sure that you're not eating based in emotion. The Buddha's not really talking about that here, but he does in other parts of his teachings, that if you're noticing that you're angry or frustrated or sad and you turn to food in order to get pleasant feelings, that's just keeping the cycle going. Because the mind, when it's experiencing painful feelings, it'll usually turn to some craving in order to try to get back to something that feels somewhat comfortable. That's where people will turn to sex or gambling, shopping, or any number of things, even food, to be able to get to pleasant feelings, because those painful feelings don't feel comfortable. But that's just keeping the cycle going. What you would like to do is figure out what is the craving, desire, attachment that's producing those sad feelings, and get rid of that. Because if you get rid of that, then you won't end up in the sad feelings again. So eating in moderation ensures that you're not eating based in craving. Then if you're noticing that you're, regularly drowsy and your mind's not attentive and alert, then that means you're probably not getting enough sleep, and you would like to pay attention to that and make sure that you're making wise decisions about the amount of time that you're sleeping each day. So you're not interested in allowing yourself to become, sleep deprived, because this is going to allow your mind to be attentive and alert, because training this mind is a full-time job. Sure, you're going to need to do meditation, but you also need to be training your mind all throughout your day. So you're going to need your mind to be attentive and alert, and make sure that you're not just holding on to YouTube or holding on to social media or clinging to some other thing that's keeping you awake really late at night, that you're not getting a good quality amount of sleep. So you're going to need to be sure that you're making wise decisions around your sleep. Then, of course, you're going to be learning and practicing the teachings, and you're retaining your understanding of those teachings, that you're remembering what it is that you were learning, that you're not just reading books and plowing through them, or you're not just attending classes just for the sake of attending them, but instead that the things that you're learning, you're committing them to your memory so that you can then actually practice those things. That's important. and that you're not just believing the teachings, but instead you're investigating them, right? You're investigating them and penetrating into them to verify whether they're true or false. And then you would like to be regularly reviewing your mind, analyzing your mind, looking inward and observing what's going on within your own mind and seeing whether or not your mind is experiencing any particular unwholesome qualities like complacency or anger or frustration, or that you're experiencing ego and conceit, or that your speech isn't exactly where it needs to be. You are the person who's going to guide yourself to enlightenment. You're going to need a teacher to point out for you the things to learn and understand, but your teacher is impermanent in your life. You need to actually have the ability to look at your own mind and see where you're at in your practice, and then be able to make wise decisions to improve. So you're going to need to review your own mind or analyze your own mind and see what's going on within your own mind. And that can be a daily practice. And then looking at the things that you're doing that are unwise, that needs to improve, and look at the things that you're doing that are wise and wholesome that you'd like to continue to do as well. And when you see those things that are unwise and unwholesome, no need to beat yourself up about that. Every unenlightened being is doing those types of things, but now just aim to do better and now work to improve. And now when you're seeing that you're doing wholesome things, continue to do those things, making those wise decisions. So now this particular discourse is pretty similar to the previous one. In fact, it looks very similar, actually. Let me see what is different here. I think it's just a shaving down of some of the words here. Yeah, I don't see much difference here. So let me know what questions you guys have on this particular discourse. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, looks like your question on YouTube was answered. Good. All right, I don't see any questions. So there was a third piece here. It looks like that was pretty similar too. I think the difference here is the remote lodgings. You didn't see that either, Kristen. So this is the part where we've talked about, making sure that you train your mind to be able to be alone, that you don't necessarily have to go out into the forest like they did during the lifetime of the Buddha, but you're definitely going to need to, train your mind to be able to go on vacation alone, or go to the mall alone, or go to the movies alone, go to dinner alone, and things of this nature, because oftentimes the mind is craving to be with other people. So there's that fourth one there as part of this. Okay, so let's go to the next one here. This is chapter 29. Is there someone who would like to read that? Okay, looks like Zoe. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. The 5 hindrances that weaken wisdom. Monks, there are these 5 obstructions, hindrances, burdens of the mind, states that weaken wisdom. What 5? 1. Sensual desire is an obstruction, a hindrance, a burden of the mind, a state that weakens wisdom. 2. Ill will is an obstruction, a hindrance, a burden of the mind, a state that weakens wisdom. 3. Complacency is an obstruction, a hindrance, a burden of the mind, a state that weakens wisdom. 4. Restlessness and worry is an obstruction, a hindrance, a burden of the mind, a state that weakens wisdom. 5. Doubt is an obstruction, a hindrance, a burden of the mind, a state that weakens wisdom. These are the 5 obstructions, hindrances, burdens of the mind, states that weaken wisdom. Monks, without having abandoned these 5 obstructions, hindrances, burdens of the mind, states that weaken wisdom, it is impossible that a monk with his ineffective and fragile wisdom might know his own wholesomeness, the wholesomeness of others, or the wholesomeness of both, or realize a superhuman distinction in wisdom and vision worthy of the noble ones. Suppose a river were flowing down a mountain, traveling a long distance, with a swift current, carrying along much trash. Then, on both of its banks, a man would open irrigation channels. In such a case, the current in the middle of the river would be dispersed, spread out, and divided, so that the river would no longer travel a long distance with a swift current, carrying along much trash. So too, without having abandoned these 5 obstructions, hindrances, burdens of the mind, states that weaken wisdom, it is impossible that a monk with his ineffective and fragile wisdom might know his own wholesomeness, the wholesomeness of others, or the wholesomeness of both, or might realize superhuman distinction in wisdom and vision worthy of the noble ones. The followings are the reverse aspects of monks who are void of hindrances. These are the monks who penetrate ignorance, unknowing of true reality, through wisdom, just as a swift current of a river with irrigation channels closed on both of its banks could travel a long distance. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. So these are the 5 obstructions or hindrances to your enlightenment. They're similar to the 10 fetters. The 10 fetters are much more individuals of, distinctions of the pollutions that are in the mind. But oftentimes when the Buddha is talking about a different topic, he will include things from his other teachings because there's overlap in the way that he's teaching here. So the thing that's not part of the 10 fetters is the complacency. But all of these others are part of the 10 fetters that you would need to be able to understand what those are and eliminate them. So each of these is going to hinder your ability to be able to get to enlightenment. So whenever you're experiencing difficulties on the path and you're, maybe bogged down and not experiencing some progress, you would like to look at these to be able to see what is it that's holding you up. And it can be any one of these, or it can be a combination of these. So you need to be able to know what these are and know what the solutions are. I teach this at the end of each group learning program. So I've taught it many times and it's been recorded. So if you're interested in knowing what any of these are or the solutions to them, we could talk about them if you like. But I've taught it in detail on the group learning program when I am teaching that. So you can learn that in the group learning program or watch one of the recordings, because each of these are detrimental to your growth and development on the path. So you'd like to be able to make sure that you know the solutions to these so you can uproot them out of the mind. And that's going to help you to make progress on the path. So let me know what questions you guys have here about this particular chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So let's go to the next one. I think this one is somewhat similar, if I remember. Yeah. Okay, it looks like Pat. Go ahead, sir.
These 5 hindrances are called obstacles. Hindrances, coverings up, envelopings. Vasetha, it is just as if the river of Siravati were full of water so that a crow could drink out of it, and a man could come along wishing to cross over, to get to the other side, to get across, and were to lie down on the bank, covering his head with a shawl. What do you think, Vasetha? Would that man be able to get to the other side? No, Master Teacher Gotama. In the same way, Vasetha, in the noble discipline, these 5 hindrances are called obstacles, hindrances, coverings up, envelopings. Which 5? The hindrance of sensual desire, of ill will, of complacency, of restlessness, and worry, of doubt. These 5 are called obstacles, hindrances, coverings up, envelopings. And these Brahmins learned in the 3 Vedas are caught up, confined in, obstructed, entangled in these 5 hindrances. But that such Brahmins learned in the 3 Vedas who persistently neglect what a Brahmin should do and persistently do what a Brahmin should not do, and who are caught up, confined in, obstructed, entangled in these 5 hindrances, should attain after death, at the breaking up of the body, to union with Brahma that is just not possible. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So here the Buddha is once again talking about the 5 hindrances, but he's talking about it in relationship to these Brahmin, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, these Brahmin, their ultimate goal was to be in union with God. That's what they were interested in. The Buddha is saying, if you have these 5 hindrances, it's not possible for you to actually accomplish that. So you're interested in getting rid of these 5 hindrances because that's what's going to lead to your enlightenment. But if someone has some aspiration to, be wholesome and be able to have some type of relationship with God, it's wise to eliminate these 5 hindrances. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions. So I'm going to go to the next one here. This is chapter 31. Would somebody like to read this one? Okay, Vibhav. Go ahead, Vibhav.
Thank you. Then the Tathagata guides him further. When Agavesna, the noble disciple, possesses mindfulness and full awareness, then the Tathagata guides him further. Come, monk, resort to a secluded resting place. The forest, the foot of a tree, a mountain, a ravine, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, a jungle thicket, an open space, a heap of straw. He resorts to a secluded resting place. The forest, the foot of a tree, a mountain, a ravine, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, a jungle thicket, an open space, a heap of straw. On returning from his alms round, after his meal, he sits down, folding his legs crosswise, setting his body erect, and establishing mindfulness before him. Abandoning craving for the world, he resides with the mind free from craving. He purifies his mind free from craving. Abandoning ill will, and hatred, he resides with the mind free from ill will, compassionate for the welfare of all living beings. He purifies his mind from ill will and hatred. Abandoning complacency, he resides with the mind free from complacency, perceptive of light, mindful, fully aware. He purifies his mind from complacency. Abandoning restlessness and worry, he resides unagitated with the mind inwardly peaceful. He purifies his mind from restlessness and worry. Abandoning doubt, he resides having gone beyond doubt, confident about wholesome states. He purifies his mind from doubt. Having thus abandoned these 5 hindrances, imperfections of the mind that weaken wisdom, he resides reflecting on the body as a body, dedicated, fully aware and mindful, having put away craving and grief for the world. He resides reflecting on feeling and feelings as feelings, mind is mind, mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, fully aware and mindful, having put away craving and grief for the world. Then the Tathagata guides him further. Come, monk, reside reflecting on the body as a body, but do not think thoughts connected with the body. Reside reflecting on feelings as feelings, but do not think thoughts connected with feelings. Reside reflecting on mind as mind, but do not think thoughts connected with the mind. Reside reflecting on mental objects and mental objects, but do not think thoughts connected with mental objects. With the subsiding of thinking and pondering, by gaining inner tranquility and oneness of mind, he enters and resides in the second jhana, which is without thinking and pondering, based in concentration, filled with excitement and joy. Further, the Buddha explained the third jhana, the fourth jhana, the remembering of past lives, the divine eye, the destruction of the obtains, and enlightenment according to the standard Pali reference. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Vibhav. So once again, the Buddha is referencing the 5 hindrances here and explaining to eliminate those. Those need to be abandoned from the mind. And then ultimately, once somebody is working on eliminating those, then he talks about this further development, that he's guiding someone to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness, because that's what you're experiencing as you're getting into the jhanas. The mind's going to have fully developed the 4 foundations of mindfulness by the time you get to the 4th jhana. You're going to need that in order to be able to make your way all the way to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is just another iteration, another way of talking about the 5 hindrances and adding just a little bit more content. Okay. Don't see anything. Vibhav, is that a question?
Yes. I had a question on the 5 hindrances. So I've read, in this, the way it's described here is this, getting, I guess not getting rid of it, but reducing all these 5 hindrances to a large extent, is that a prerequisite to get into the jhanas?
So yes, abandoning, but it's not fully abandoned by the time you get into the jhanas, but you need to be working on abandoning them. And the Eightfold Path is helping you to be able to do that, but you also need to be aware of these. And because, for example, if someone was complacent, they're not going to be doing the work that they need to do in order to be able to even apply the Eightfold Path. So you need to be working on abandoning, but they won't be fully abandoned until much later.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll go to the next chapter, which is chapter 32. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Actually, take a look at this. Yeah, okay. Looks like many people. Okay, we'll go with Chris, since Chris hasn't read yet today.
The cause and reason for the true teachings to endure long after a Tathagata has attained final Nibbana. Master Gotama, what is the cause and reason why the true teachings do not endure long after a Tathagata has attained final Nibbana? And what is the cause and reason why the true teachings endure long after a Tathagata has attained final Nibbana? It is, Brahman, because the 4 foundations of mindfulness are not developed and cultivated, that the true teachings do not endure long after a Tathagata has attained final Nibbana. And it is because the 4 foundations of mindfulness are developed and cultivated that the true teachings endure long after a Tathagata has attained final Nibbana. What for? Here, Brahman, a monk resides reflecting on the body as body, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. He resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. He resides reflecting on mind as mind, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, and having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. He resides reflecting on mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. It is because these 4 foundations of mindfulness are not developed and cultivated that the true teachings do not endure long after Tathagata has attained final Nibbana. And it is because the 4 foundations of mindfulness are developed and cultivated that the true teachings endure long after a Tathagata has attained final Nibbana.
Right. Thank you, Chris. So the way that the teachings of a Buddha continue in the world is that people get to enlightenment. If more and more and more people get to enlightenment, those individuals who are enlightened, the teachings are deeply rooted in their mind. They'll never forget what it takes for them to have gotten to enlightenment, and they would be able to share those teachings if somebody was interested in learning them, and they would be able to help them to understand how to be able to train their mind to get to enlightenment because they did it, so they'd be able to describe it to someone else. So getting to enlightenment is to ensure that the teachings actually continue for your own self, but then also for other people to be able to learn and understand them. If there's one thing out of all the things that the Buddha taught that's really like a real linchpin that's going to help you to be able to get to enlightenment, it's the 4 foundations of mindfulness. We could say that without any one particular part of the teachings of the Buddha, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. But without the 4 foundations of mindfulness, there's just absolutely no way that anybody would be able to get to enlightenment. Because what you're doing with the 4 foundations of mindfulness is you're developing the ability to notice the bodily sensations that are occurring prior to the mind experiencing discontentedness, before the feeling is formed in the mind. Once the feeling is formed in the mind, of course, you're learning to cut that off and let that go. But in order to really get to enlightenment, you've got to get ahead of that. You've got to cut it off and let it go as a bodily sensation. So without the 4 foundations of mindfulness, you won't be able to cut it off as a bodily sensation because somebody doesn't even know that that's something that needs to occur. So therefore, people aren't going to be able to get to enlightenment. So that's why the Buddha is saying that the 4 foundations of mindfulness being developed and cultivated, that it leads to ensuring that the teachings are going to last for a long time. And if somebody isn't developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness, then it's not going to produce the results of having the teachings be preserved in the world, because there's not going to be people who are getting to enlightenment. So it's so important for you to develop that ability to cut off and let go at the bodily sensations, because that's getting ahead of the curve and not allowing the mind to continue to stay wired with these discontent feelings. And it can oftentimes take multiple years just to get to the point where you're observant of that and you're noticing that every single time and cutting off at the bodily sensations every single time. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions. So we'll go to the next chapter. Is there someone who would like to read this one, chapter 33? This one, actually, I think I decided I wasn't going to read this one in class because it's really quite long and just kind of watching the time. Let me just ask if you guys have any questions on this one. For those of you guys that might have read, you might have questions. So let me just pause and see if you guys have questions here. Yeah, I don't see any questions. Okay, so if you guys have any questions, you guys know you guys can always send those in all the different ways that you guys can ask questions. So this is a quite long one that we don't necessarily have time to read today. But here, this one is the last one for today. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, go ahead, Pat.
Thank you. To concentration in the morning, in the middle of the day, and in the evening. Monks, possessing 3 factors, a shopkeeper is capable of acquiring wealth, not just acquired, and of increasing wealth already acquired. What 3? Here, a shopkeeper diligently applies himself to his work in the morning, in the middle of the day, and in the evening. Possessing these 3 factors, a shopkeeper is capable of acquiring wealth not yet acquired, and of increasing wealth already acquired. So too, possessing 3 factors, a monk is capable of achieving a wholesome state not yet attained, and of increasing a wholesome state already attained. What 3? Here, a monk diligently applies himself to an object of concentration in the morning, in the middle of the day, and in the evening. Possessing these 3 factors, a monk is capable of achieving a wholesome state not yet attained, and of increasing a wholesome state already attained. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So here the Buddha is essentially sharing that it's important to do meditation 3 times a day, morning, middle of the day, and evening. That's what he means by object of concentration. It's the breath that is the object of concentration that you're focusing on in the morning, the middle of the day, and the evening. And he's relating this to a shopkeeper because people would understand growing and developing your business, that you would pay attention to it in the morning, in the middle of the day, and the evening. And the same thing's true about the development of the mind. It's a full-time job, and you need this meditation to be able to help you to develop the qualities that you're going to then apply in your day-to-day life. So remember, with breathing mindfulness meditation, you're cultivating the wholesome qualities of mindfulness or awareness of mind and concentration, ability to focus and be concentrated. And you need those wholesome qualities all throughout your day because your mindfulness is watching over the mind. And that's what's going to help you to apply the 4 foundations of mindfulness to be able to cut off and let go at the bodily sensations. And you need that focus and concentration so that you can access your wisdom and make wise decisions. So that's what the wholesome qualities are that are being cultivated in the breathing mindfulness meditation. And then your mind is also eliminating the unwholesome quality of craving, desire, attachment, the mind holding on, the longing, yearning that the mind has. So that's why it's so important to be able to cultivate this practice. And when you're first starting out, you usually spend about 4 to 8 weeks developing your practice of breathing mindfulness meditation before you bring in the loving kindness meditation. So remember, your breathing mindfulness meditation, your frequency is more important than the duration. When you're first starting out, if it's a matter of 1 meditation for 30 minutes or 2 for 15, the 2 for 15 is actually going to be more impactful. But you start wherever you start. When I first started meditation, I was meditating for about a minute. That's all I could do. My mind was so congested and had so much pollution. It was like hitting a brick wall. So you just start out wherever you start, and then you just gradually expand your practice from there. understanding that the Buddha meditated morning, middle of the day, and evening. There's not a specific time that you need to meditate. So if you see somebody say that you need to meditate at 3:30 a.m. every day, this isn't true. The Buddha wasn't able to keep track of time to that degree because watches and timepieces weren't invented yet. But you'll hear some people that will give those types of recommendations, and they're not understanding impermanence, and they're not understanding that that's not needed. There's nothing special that's happening at 3:30 a.m. in the morning that's going to make your meditation any better or any worse, right? So you meditate when you would like to meditate. You would like to have these anchor points of morning, in the evening, and then if you can get a midday meditation in, this is just going to help you that much more to be able to experience progress and improvement on the path to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So I'm just going to end by thanking all of you guys. Thank you for participating in class. Thank you for reading. Thank you for your questions. Thanks for your dedication to developing your practice. Next week, we're going to be in the first 10 chapters of Volume 8. Volume 8 is the Foremost Householder. This is the book that is got a collection of teachings for household practitioners. All the other books are important for household practitioners too, but this is really geared towards household practitioners. So this will be helpful for you to really take your time in reading either before and after class. That's going to help you to be able to understand those teachings. Tomorrow, I'm going to be sharing in the group learning program the moral conduct section of the Eightfold Path. We're doing this 3-part series on the Eightfold Path, and we're going to be diving into moral conduct tomorrow, which is right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So if you need a refresher on that, or if you haven't learned that with me yet, that's a great opportunity for you to learn in class tomorrow. So take care and be well, and perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. We'll see you next time. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.